Now, that's where it gets dangerous because what the research shows is the more externally driven you are for validation, the more unhappy you are, and ultimately the worse outcomes. And so when we get into this, think about this. It's the idea of being the best versus your best.
All right, guys, get excited. Let me ask you this as we're kicking this off. Have you ever caught yourself stuck in the scroll? You know what I'm talking about, comparing your actual life, the messiness, the beauty, the hard stuff, all that. You find yourself comparing yourself to somebody else's highlight reel. Our guest totally gets that. In fact, Jake Thompson built an entire movement around flipping that script. Back in 2011, he was selling t-shirts out of the trunk of his car. But he was fueled by one core belief. That was real competition isn't out there. It's inside, and it's with the person you were yesterday. Since then, Jake's turned that message into Compete Every Day, a brand and a mission that's impacted countless leaders and individuals worldwide. He's an entrepreneur. He's a performance coach, 2 times bestseller. He's a speaker, an incredible speaker, and he's the creator of the Compete framework, which helps us to ditch the comparison trap and build the grit, the habits, and the mindset to lead and live well and do it right now. And his newest message is comparison can be dangerous, but it's not always the enemy. In fact, Jake believes that comparison can actually be one of the greatest tools for growth if you actually know how to use it. So that's what we're going to unpack today, and I can't friggin' wait. Now, before we go there, though, I just want to let you know some fun facts is one, I love and trust Jake. That's why it's his 3rd time on Dream Think Do. One of the few people that's a 3-time guest. And also, secondly, and just as importantly, he's the only performance coach whose kids are named Sugar, Donut, Snacks, and Pop-Tart. That's right, Jake and his amazing wife own 3 beautiful rescue dogs with the best friggin' names of all time. So let's do this. Jake, welcome back to Dream Think Do, buddy.
Thanks, man. It's good to see you, man. And
good
we
to
may
see
have
you too. I love having a podcast because it gives me the excuse to hang out with cool people like you. But it is always good to see you, and I love it when you come to my area. When I get to come to your area, it's all good. So this is great. But I was going back and forth with you because it felt like it was time to have you back. And I was like, what do you want to talk about? Let's talk about what do you want to talk about? And you were like, let's rip into comparison. And this is such an important topic. It's a hot topic because, boy, a lot of people point to it. Higher rates of depression, not just with kids, but with adults, higher rates of even suicide. And a lot of people are pointing to comparison as being kind of a leading cause of all of that. And you're flipping the script. You're saying, hey, it is dangerous, but it could be a tool. Why was this important for you?
Yeah. So I think I struggled, and like most people, right? We create, we write, we do the work to help ourselves more than anyone else. And I found myself for a lot of years really struggling with comparison. I grew up small East Texas town, and this is going to date me, but like it was my junior year of high school, we got dial-up internet, like no Facebook, but like,
yep.
I would clog
and
the phone line.
There's a number of people listening right now that got that sound going in their ear.
Man, the dial-up, I used to hog the phone to play fantasy basketball and baseball. Like that was like, I'd sit on the computer and AIM messaging, right?
Yeah.
You'd message friends from high school. And so I grew up like small town. You only really had to compare yourself to other people around you. You weren't really, you would read the paper, and for us in Texas, Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine, which is like the holy Bible of high school football. You'd read about other people, but like there wasn't kind of this direct comparison. And then I go off to school and I notice like I'm struggling a little bit fitting in. I'm always comparing myself to other people. And it's not how well am I doing? It's how am I doing in comparison to everyone else, right? And it ties into this me versus you. And what I realized is growing up, I was an undersized athlete. So competition for me was the outlier and way to prove that I could play, right? I could outwork you and I could outsmart you even if you were more talented. And so I grew up with that mentality. The older I got, the more unhealthy it became. And so when you look at this me versus you, it's really what we're doing. We're really comparing ourselves. And the problem we run into is there's always someone ahead of you, always someone behind you. You're never good enough, or you're good enough that you can coast. And flash forward, throughout career and life, then we get introduced to social media. And all of a sudden, we have billions of people in the palm of our hands. And when I was in the early days of building Compete Every Day, I struggled with looking at what everyone else was doing and then telling myself a story based off of a snapshot on social media of how much better they were doing or what I need to do differently. And that got me into trouble. And as the business grew, I accumulated business debt and I found myself in a really bad spot financially about probably 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, and realized like I had been playing other people's games because I was only comparing myself to them without knowing their true story or what even their goals were. And even to this day, like I have to be really mindful of how I use social because I think all of us go through this, right? You have a big win. If you're listening, you get a promotion at work, or you just signed your biggest client to your business, or you bought a nice new car, you went on this amazing trip, and then you open social media and someone else has done something that looks even cooler, right?
Right?
You went to Greece, they were on a yacht in Greece, and you're just like, and all of a sudden that high is gone. And I was like, this is not how it's supposed to be. Like, this is not the game that we all need to play. And so I started to say, what more is to it, right? I've always thought the answer to comparison is competition because in sports, you're either playing the game or you're focused on someone else. Like, you can't do both at the same time. And so I really started pulling at this thread of why do we compare? What are the different ways that we do it in an unhealthy manner? And is it actually something that could be to our advantage? And what I found is 100% it can if you lay the right foundation.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it is so important. And I love that you went back to your history because I remember dial up. I remember phones on the walls, right? Stretching that
Mhm.
cord around to the bathroom so you could talk to your friends quietly on the, have some privacy for crying out loud.
You remember getting call waiting? That was
Yeah.
such a
Oh
big
my
deal.
gosh. Yeah. Like, dude, do I pick up the phone? All of that. Right. And what I think that is important to recognize that comparison has always been a part of the human condition, but now it's basically with nitro because again, the social media comparison levels are amazing. It's truly a multiplier. So it's an important thing that we recognize an element of this has been around since the dawn of time, but boy, we've got to get some new tools in the toolbox because obviously technology is moving fast. And, I have a feeling the ways that we can compare ourselves now is only going to be exponential. It's only going to grow exponentially, right? The number of
Only going to
platforms
grow.
that are going to exist, all that stuff. But to go, hey, wait a second, there's some hope here if we flip the script, if we look at this playbook a little differently. What are you finding? I know you're talking to groups. I know you're working with leaders all the time. You are trying this stuff out yourself, of course, but you're rolling this out to countless folks. What are some of the core strategies you start with? If somebody's right there going, all right, I know I need to deal with it. And we only have successful people listening to
Yeah,
Dream
we
Think
do.
Do. We got rock stars, right? These are high achievers, but everybody can fall into this comparison trap. So where do you start with folks? When you start to flip the script, what's some of the best places to start?
Yeah. So I want to echo one of the things you said there from this being from the dawn of time. Like, comparison is programmed into your brain. If we go back hundreds of years, you had to compare yourself in the small tribe because you
Right.
had to add value. If you were
Yep.
ostracized, if you were put on your own, if you were not adding to the society, you were going to be sent off. And back in those days, if you were on your own, you were going to die. So comparison has always been there from a social dynamic. The problem is now we have access to billions of people that our brains have a hard time struggling with. If you think about it from a simple dating perspective, you go back 100 years ago to early 1920s, like you're going to date somebody you went to school with or lived in your little town area.
Yep.
And so that was
That's
it.
it.
That was
That's the
all you were
gene pool,
exposed to.
baby.
You might have met 150 for us guys. You might have met 150 people that could be potential spouses, partners in your lifetime. Now you can scroll through 1,000 in 30 seconds. Like, so your brain is right now, your brain is even more amplified to it. The biggest challenge we run into is one, thinking something's wrong with us. So that's the first, is just accepting comparison is part of the game. However, the biggest thing that we see when it comes to comparison is it's ultimately a battle of external validation and ego. When we are externally driven and we seek all of our validation of who we are as an entrepreneur, we are as a person, outside forces, then what happens is we're always comparing ourselves to others for posturing. We're trying to prove that we're more deserving of external validation than other people. Now, that's where it gets dangerous because what the research shows is the more externally driven you are for validation, the more unhappy you are, and ultimately the worse outcomes. And so when we get into this, think about this. It's the idea of being the best versus your best. The best is a moving target. Your best is a continual growth pattern. Over a research study was done about a year ago, and they looked at 70,000 athletes, business people, successful people. And what they found is the people who were externally motivated by validation fared far worse, not only in mental health, happiness, but in external outcomes. They
Yeah.
actually did worse in
Yeah.
business and in life than the people who were internally driven to be their best. And so that's a big, big piece of it, is really flipping the script of saying, are we seeking validation and our worth from other people or internally? And if we can start to, more than anything, and this is going to sound really funny coming from me as a guy who's not woo-ish, but like if you
Yeah, you're
learn
not
to love,
woo-woo, right?
I'm not the woo-woo guy. I'm like, like you talk about dream, do the things, right?
Right?
But if you can learn to seek the validation and worth from yourself and how you show up with your inputs and the things that are in your control, you fare far better. You're far happier. The comparison, the stats on the comparison side from that unhealthy when we're externally driven is just way worse. So when we're working with leaders, we have to figure out what's the actual thing that we're seeking validation or acceptance for. Because otherwise we get into the comparing ourselves of like, why bother? Right? Mitch has this incredible podcast in business. Why even bother starting my own? He's already doing this, right? We tell ourselves that all the time. And what we do is self-handicap ourselves from doing our best. We mail in our efforts at work. We mail in these things because we're lowering the bar that if we fail, we give ourselves an out that, "Oh, I didn't give my best. So maybe if I had, we could have won," versus you give your best and you don't hit it. You have to face that fact of, oh, I've got to get better. And
Yeah.
most people don't want to do that, right? So your ego protects it. So the big one is that where's the motivation? But then it's creating the process of getting back on track with the game that actually matters to you. And so for us, like before we even get down the path of putting in processes for when you're scrolling social media and things like that, you really need to know the answer to the game you want to play in. And for us in the compete framework, it's the C, it's the clarify. So what's the game you want to play? Who are you in competition with? And why does it even matter to win? This is really important because for the majority of us, the people we compare ourselves to are playing an entirely different game. If you are a single mom of 3 trying to build your coaching business, you're playing a very different game than a 21-year-old single guy who maybe was born with money, has a lot of connections, been doing this for 5 years. It's a different game entirely. And so when you try to play their game, you're going to lose. So what's the game? The competition is rarely external. It's always the internal doubts. It's the limiting beliefs. It's the negative self-talk. It's the poor habits. If you address those and understand those, then you can start to attack them. And then the biggest one is the why. And I know you talk about this of purpose and why and that internal fire, but why does it matter to win? Like, why does it matter that you have a nicer car than your neighbor? Is it because you want to feel more valued as a human? Is it because you want to feel validated as a person? Or is it because you just love your car? Like that's the dream car you always wanted as a kid. And you told yourself one day when I made it, I'd do this, right? You got to know the why. And so once we get clear on the game, then we start to put in safeguards and protocols for when we get off track comparing ourselves. And I say this, like I still use this, and really it's going to come down to intentionality. The most likely place you're going to compare yourself is on your phone and on social media. And that means if you just haphazardly pick up your phone when you're in line at the grocery store or you're sitting on the toilet or waiting in the airport and you just pick it up to scroll, you're more likely going to get sucked into it because you're not going on with the intention of why am I using this platform?
Yep.
But
And
if you
that's
go on,
oftentimes
yeah,
for a lot of people, that's also the time, whether it's end of day, whether it's a rushed lunch, it's not when we're at our best. It's not when our thinking is at optimum. It's oftentimes when we're already tired, our guard is down, and
yeah,
that's when we get hit. I love that. It's so good. I want to go back to a number of the things that you said. The author Danny Silk wrote once, he said, check yourself. Do it from love, not for love. and you'll be an unstoppable force. And I love that because it is a good way to check that, because it's like, hey, am I doing this to be loved, or am I doing it from a place of love and abundance and peace and joy? And so it is the good way to check yourself. But I love that of saying, hey, what is the game that I want to play? Because you're exactly right. Everybody's game is different, and it's almost impossible to know everybody else's game, right? It's easy to assume you know everybody else's game, but it's impossible to know. You don't know their family, you don't know their network, you don't know what they've been given, you don't know what they fought through, all of those things, right? So it's almost an impossible task. We assume we can, but it's almost an impossible task to figure out anybody else's game. So really all we can do is to figure out our game. Like, what game do you actually want to play? And I think that is so important, because all of this for most people happens at a subconscious level, and we suck at it if we keep it at a subconscious level. But just by understanding the question of what game do I want to play and why, that I can see why that's where it starts, because that does make a difference. And it does take it from the subconscious to the conscious, which raises your understanding, but it also raises your ability to do it.
Yeah, and that's really key. The other aspect along the same lines of bringing stuff to the our awareness level is, and you know this, as successful as you've been, there's a lot of people out playing a game for looks and not growth, right? And you can easily fall into the trap of that person you see on social media that has 100,000 followers and think, oh my gosh, like they're killing it. What am I doing wrong? And I can tell you for a fact, there's people I know that have under 10,000 followers that make way more money than those, because they
Way
buy,
more money.
they posture.
That's
You
right.
go on,
It's
there's
amazing.
5 likes, right? You're like, there's 5 likes. And so understanding the games behind the game, because people are doing it for look. The other thing that I heard Chris Williamson say on the Modern Wisdom podcast that's always stuck with me, and I think about this every time I catch myself in comparison. He said, how many times do we look at somebody and envy what they've achieved, but have no desire the cost of what it took to get there? And I think about Michael Jordan for me, because like most of us, grew up in the driveway shooting game 6 winners, like shooting end of game shots. And you're like, oh, what would it be to be Jordan? Take aside his training. Like, you understand you got to pay a price physically. How emotionally burnt are his relationships? And how many people listening to this love their kids, their spouse, and their life? And no matter what, like, you wouldn't trade those people to achieve that business goal that you're envying on social. So like, that's where, like, when you start to understand that, of like, man, I want to compete to be a great dad, a great business owner, and make an impact on people, then that other person who does not care about those same things, why would I want to be them or trade places with them? So all of this is kind of pulling back the curtain on the stories we tell ourselves around the highlight reels that we look at in comparison to our full movie back of house cut film.
Right. I love that. And it is so important, especially, and again, I talked with my parents about what it was like to grow up in a really small town in Iowa. And there were all of these elements of comparison, like you're saying, all of these elements existed. There was one rich kid with a really nice car, but you don't really know what his home life was. You don't know what his family did to do that, all that, but you could still fall into the comparison trap. But now we have access to all of these different stories, not just in our small village, but in all villages. And you're right. Like, I love studying evolutionary psychology. Not a big fan of evolution as far as jumping species, but evolutionary psychology is fascinating. And it talks about the upward and downward comparison is one of those things that has kept people alive for thousands of years. I even to go back to scripture, which I know you're a fan of as well, but like to go back and when John is telling the story of he and Peter running to the tomb of Jesus, he mentions that they both ran and he got there first, right? Like,
Slid that in into eternal text.
What is going on? Like, that's thousands of years with guys that literally hung out with Jesus for 3 years. And you're like, oh, you guys are still competing enough to jab someone for thousands of years. So I love like being able to see that, to go, okay, we're not alone, right? And I like this, that to be able to say, all right, what game am I playing and why? Why does that matter? And I like that you clarified, we're not just talking about, when we say game, we're not just talking about career. We're not just talking about our business. We're talking about relationships. What kind of parent do you want to be? What kind of spouse do you want to be if that's important to you? What kind of member of the community? What kind of member of the church do you want to be? All those things. That when we're talking game, it's not just one thing, it's the whole thing.
It's the whole
So I
thing.
love that. Yeah.
And I'll say on that note, like people get confused when we talk about competing every day with it's career, it's fitness, it's sports. And I was like, the best example of competing is if you're a busy professional, you're an entrepreneur, and you want to be a great parent. Like one of your games that you care about is not only growing your business, but being the best parent I can. The game you play is when you show up at your kid's practice, who are you in competition with? Your cell phone, texting,
Yeah.
answering emails, scrolling social media versus watching the kids practice and encouraging them. So what if for the next hour to win the game, you put your phone on airplane mode or do not disturb, watch your kids practice so they didn't look over and see you on the phone versus watching them. Then after the game, you check it. Like that's a game within a game. And so it all comes down to that intentionality. Before we talk about leveraging it, I think it's helpful to know as well is getting into the pattern, as you talked about, bringing stuff to our awareness level, is starting to pay attention to your triggers. The
Yeah.
late night, right? Hey, or I've gone out to happy hour and I'm back home at the house and I catch myself scrolling social media and that's when I get in my own head. Or when I go to different events and places, like the more you can understand where the temptations are and where the triggers are, the more you're ready with a reset program that we would call to get kind of back in your lane once you get there. And so I think just along the same lines of knowing the game you want to play, start to pay attention to the things that set you off in that
Yeah.
arena.
Give me a couple other examples of triggers because I love that and I think it's so important. And you talk to anybody that's recovering from addiction. I just had somebody on that had a 10-year opioid addiction, right? And you go, oh man, that's extreme. I don't have addiction. It's like we all have addictions. We all have addictions, right? We all have to watch for those triggers and just it's just different types of drugs, right? And I think just about everybody I know probably has an addiction issue with their phone, right? So, what would you say are a couple other triggers as people are thinking about we're gonna go to a reset, right? We're gonna talk about how do you reset after we realize we're being triggered. What's a couple of other examples that you see in your own life or in the leaders that you work with? What are some other examples of triggers? Obviously, late night sitting on the couch, real tempting to just pop open that phone. What else?
Boredom is a big one. The
Yeah.
one I think that's probably going to hit home because such high performers listen to this show. It's when you go to conferences and events, when you go to
Yeah.
EncourageCon and you see people on stage or you see other people in the audience and they're talking about different things or sharing how they're having great wins. Your immediate instinct is all of the mess. One, because we naturally discredit our own success because we're used to it as normal. And so not only do we downplay what we've done, but we amplify others because we're painting a story. So places where we would intentionally go. Great example is a couple weeks ago, I was at in a National Speaker Association annual conference. And one of the guys took the stage for one of the programs. Main stage is a big deal, right? It's 400 to 1,000 of your peers in the room and you're presenting while also teaching. And one of the guys got out there and he did a program with his two kids who are both American Ninja Warrior athletes, like top ranked teens. It was one of the cooler keynote experiences I've seen because of how he did it. And initially I was like, oh man, we teach on some of the same concepts, but I could never do that. Like the thought went in my head of like, I'm not this, I can't build that set, I can't do this. But then I thought, I have an entirely different presentation style than he does. Like I'm chasing a different game than he is. How can I watch this and observe and take notes of how he presented it versus comparing myself in an unhealthy manner? So like even to this day, I catch it. I can get on social media and see things. I know things now more about the people sometimes that I'm connected with and think, oh man, I can't believe I used to think that, knowing kind of the rest of the story now. But the biggest example I give people is like, if you went to my social media in 2017 and 18, when I was early stages of starting speaking, I was literally at
Yeah.
the same time about to go off a cliff with my business, you would look like I was living the best life. Yet mentally, like it was the lowest of lows. I remember sitting at my kitchen table and coming to the realization of, I know why entrepreneurs kill themselves. I was like, I'm not at that point, but I've confused who I am with what I do. And now I'm comparing myself to people who are crushing it, and I know I'm not. Like, I understand it. So it's just really dangerous where it pops up in these different areas. And the biggest telltale signs is, how do you start beating yourself up? How does your motivation levels drop? And how do you start to kind of check out of like, why bother? What's the point? Why put in the effort? These are all the things that start to become signals of you're not good enough, that you realize I'm sipping into the quicksand trap.
This is so good because what I love about this, and this is just it goes hand in glove. I just had Chandler Bolt on, and he's built just it seems like overnight, but I know he's worked his butt off to build a $12 million business, and he just turned 30. Punk, right?
I
Well, one of the
know.
things he talks about is that a mentor once told him, "Hey, if you're the smartest person in the room, get to a different room because you need to level up," right? And I think that is incredible wisdom, and it has definitely driven him. And a lot of Dream Think Doers let me know that, like, "Whoa, man, I need to get some new rooms," right? But what you just talked about, going to NSA, right? Like you are intentional with getting yourself in the room with the best of the best. That's why you're becoming, and I think you already are, but you're becoming one of the best of the best. I mean, you're top 17% of all speakers, right? Like, I mean, it's just incredible what you're doing with your speaking business. And it is because you continually push yourself. The challenge with that, especially for those that are continuing to push themselves, continuing to get into new rooms of people with the best of the best in them, is boy, this comparison thing is even more dangerous, or can be more dangerous if we don't understand it. So I so appreciate the listing those triggers of sometimes it's time of day, sometimes it's location. Like if you're getting in the room with people that push you and stretch you and give you a new standard, that's great. But boy, we got to keep comparison in its place to be able to say, hey, I love the triggers of being able to say, all of a sudden, my energy level just dropped to the floor, or all of a sudden getting hit by a wave of fear. Like those are all triggers for comparison. Now, what do we do with it? So I love this. This is so good. Where do we go next?
Yeah. So, and to your point, the thing that ultimately sits with all of us that keeps us in that space, we would call it the drift zone, is your ego.
Yeah.
It's protecting your ego in
Yeah.
any and every sit. You don't go into rooms with more successful people because you want to protect your ego, right? You're worried about getting feedback because you want to protect your ego. And what that causes us to do is to drift. And just like relationally, you end up looking up one day and thinking, how did I get here? I had no desire to get here. But you kept choosing ego over pursuing excellence. And so we call that the competitor's choice. If you will decide to compete versus to protect your ego, that's where the magic happens, right? That's when you can start fighting comparison. And so the first is really, when you catch it, it's almost like anything else. The first question is this the game I actually want to play? Like, are they playing the game I want to play? So great example at NSA, I'm watching the other speaker. Is the game he's playing I want to play? Sort of. He's keynoting. He's doing a phenomenal job teaching similar content. So it's a similar game, but he has a different focus, a different family affair, and a different delivery. So I can recognize there's parts of the game, but it's not the same game I want to
Yep.
play.
Yep.
The second question is this within my control? Is the thing I'm comparing myself and beating myself up for not having at the level they have within my control? And for some of you, like, you're comparing yourself, like we said, a single person to a parent of three, a person just starting their business in year one to somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. Like, that's not within your control at this point. And so when you start to realize that, you say, oh, I'm at a different part of the marathon. I'm just starting the marathon. There's a different game entirely.
Yeah.
And then the third question is really we call it the come to Jesus question of, am I feeling this way because my ego is bruised, or am I actually feeling this way because I want to get better? And those are in constant conflict, because you can care about how good you look or you can care about how much better you get, but growth is messy. Growth, when you go to the gym, your muscles break down when you're lifting heavy weights for them to grow. A comedian gets on stage and intentionally bombs to figure out what jokes work and how to build on them. Like, we always go through a messy growth. And so recognizing it, understanding, is this the game I want to play? Is this within my control? And then honestly, am I feeling this way because my ego's bruised, or because I'm actually caring about getting better? Now, once we get through that, then we can start to see comparison like fire, right?
Yeah.
Fire can destroy neighborhoods, cities, buildings, or it can keep you warm and save your life. It's all
Yeah.
about how you use the tool, and comparison is the same way.
I love that. And I do love that self-awareness. And I always say, even give yourself 5 minutes to feel all the feels. right? Like allow yourself once in a while 5 minutes, just freak out. We call it the 5 minute freak out. Like just go find a quiet place, bawl your eyes out, scream at the sky, whatever it is, and then get back to work. Right. So I love that you're saying like, hey, inventory it, ask those powerful questions. And if it is ego, maybe give yourself a 5 minute rant. That's fine. But then get back to work, right? To be able to say, all right, what can I be learning? What can I be doing? Right. So I love it. All right. Now I love this. This is so good. This is what come on. I love this stuff, Jake. So, we're identifying the game we want to play and the why, right? We're watching for those triggers. We're kind of doing that self-analysis to say, okay, where are we at? We're starting to feel it. What are we going to do? Now, where do we go?
Now, this is the fun part. So there are two people you should always be looking out for when comparing in a good way, right? If you want to use comparison to your advantage, there's two. The first we essentially call the North Star. This is world class. If you were to ask yourself, what does world class look like? What does it look like to be a world class parent? What does it look like to be a world class podcaster, world class speaker? Like this is the person way down the line. And you may be initially thinking, why am I going to look at someone so far ahead of me? Because that's out. I can't reach it. I can't get there. It's too
Yeah.
far. There's a reason you want to know what world class is because you want to start to study their habits, their behaviors. You want to know what
Yeah.
excellence is. We always have to know what excellence is in the field that we care about competing, so we have a benchmark. But then the most important part is get your eyes off the North Star. You want to find someone 3% ahead of you. There was a designer years ago named Virgil Abloh. He's passed since now, but he worked for Louis Vuitton. He did collaborations with Nike and other brands. He believed in a 3% rule. And his idea is instead of trying to create something 300% different or totally new, change it by 3%. And he was famous because what he would do is take these incremental changes and design something entirely new. And so for us, it's finding the person that's 3% ahead of you. Who's the salesperson who's maybe 15th on the ranking and you're 17th to 18th, right? Who's the person who you're like, man, they seem to have it all together on their productivity. I'm still missing some stuff. Because what they say about upward social comparison, as you mentioned earlier, is the person's far enough ahead that there's a growth gap for you to reach them, but it's not so far ahead it demotivates you trying to. They feel attainable in reaching. And so for us, when we find that person, we say, what is a habit or thing that they do every week that I should implement? How do they approach it in their craft, their work, how they schedule time with their kids that I need to look at? Maybe it's how do they manage their podcast visuals in a way that's sharper than mine? And so like when you start asking those little questions of like, I'm close. Like I can look at it. I can do what they do. They're just a little bit ahead of me. You're actually motivated because you feel like I can get there. And then once you reach them, it's like playing a giant game of tag. You find the next person 3% ahead of you and you go reach them. And then you go reach them. And eventually what you find is when you're focused on your own growth and these little bitty 3% growths, you get really close to or you become the world-class standard in your field. But it starts by shifting the focus much smaller, just like micro goals, just like chasing big goals, right? And then what supports it, what I love the best is supporting it is how you talk to yourself, which I know are things you've talked about on the show, but instead of how are they better than me, it's what are they doing that I can adopt, right? I'll never reach their level. What's my own next level to reach, right? Why bother if I can't get to world class? I can always grow and improve. And who knows if I can get there one day. Like these are the things that when you pare all this down, puts you in a position to consistently grow with yourself, which research shows keeps you more motivated and ultimately over time puts you in the best position for the best outcomes.
Come on. All right. I love the 3%. And it's such an important thing. I want to dive a little bit deeper in that because I was just thinking of a coaching client, got a very successful growing business, about 50 million. They're doing really well on a trajectory that's really impressive. But he started comparing himself to a friend who just sold a $2 billion business, right? He made a $1.5 billion overnight. And all of a sudden, this coaching client is like now feeling like garbage, right? Now, this guy is wildly talented, incredibly competent and strategic. And for him, all of a sudden, he was comparing himself, like you were saying, he was comparing somebody at the end of the marathon, not the beginning of the marathon, and was completely unaware, You know what I mean? Like that had somehow snuck in and got under his radar and was beating the crap out of him. So I love this awareness to say, hey, look at the North Star, identify some of those as maybe longer term goals, but find some of those three percenters. What's a good way that you've found? Because I know you obviously you apply this in your own business, but you help a lot of people to apply it as well in a lot of different types of businesses. What's a good way to find those three percenters? What's a good way to identify somebody that's maybe 3% ahead of you? How do you do that?
A couple of different ways. Mastermind groups have been incredibly helpful for me throughout my
Mm,
career. Getting into
yep.
groups and building relationships because everybody in there has different skill sets. One of the people in my group is phenomenal at strategic planning. Another guy is great at a keynote experience. Like we all have the different, and so, oh, you're better at this, but I'm better at this. So how do we
Yeah.
learn from each other so we both improve? So masterminds have been phenomenal. Getting direction from mentors. I have a couple of mentors who I absolutely love, and they've been very adamant when I ask them, who else should I know? Who else should I learn from? Who's someone where I will be in 2 to 3 years and maybe where you were 10 years ago? Like
Yeah.
those are the type of questions because you're getting guidance from people you trust.
Yep.
Their networks are probably bigger than yours or different than yours. So they're going
Yep.
to be able to introduce you to new people. And then you pair that with mastermind groups and you start to go along. I would say in this same vein, one of the best piece of advice I ever got was from Phil Jones, and he said, "Always have a mentor and always have a mentee. Always be
Mm,
learning, always be teaching." And what I
yeah.
found is when you take that approach, you're pouring into the people 3, 10, sometimes way beginner stages than you, but as they grow, they get more connected, right? They introduce you to new people. There's new people
Yep.
you can learn from. So all of that kind of takes into account. And then the last one I would say as well is what they're already doing. Listen to people you've never met, but you learn from all the time on their podcast and books. Like the
Yep.
greatest mentors you'll ever find are printed in books behind us. Most of us just don't make the time for them.
Yep.
And so those are great places to go because it unlocks new questions, new knowledge. But on a face to face side, nothing beats going to like your conference, EncourageCon. Nothing
Yeah.
beats getting plugged into a mastermind or an association because you start to build the relationships with people and see where others excel and
Yep.
then go and even to the point of oh, you're a coach or you're doing this, you're a business owner, like going to an industry event, which you might have never gone to because you're like, what's the point? You know, kind of, and just building relationships with other people in the industry to learn what they're doing.
Yep.
You would be surprised. There's a lot of people that keep their cards close to their chest, but there's a lot of people who are like, there's enough wins out there. Like,
Yep.
I'll help you, you help me. We have different audiences. Like, what can I do? And so that's where I typically recommend finding those people ahead of you, close and far.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of some of your three percenters. I would imagine you would say some of those three percenters can be virtual, right? They could be somebody that's read a book, they've got a podcast. You can just tap right in to that person, never being in the same room with them. But some of your three percenters, it probably makes sense and is really healthy and a lot more effective to have some of your three percenters actually people that you know, that you talk with, you have access to, all of those things. Again, a big part of this is to know the real story, right? Get to know some of their behind the scenes, get to know some of their mess, get to know some of the things that they're proud of, and maybe some of those things they wouldn't wish on their worst enemy, right? That
And
kind of
even
thing is,
personal life too.
yeah,
Like,
right.
if you're a parent, like, spend time find other entrepreneurs, coaches, people who are also parents
Yep.
within your larger community, wherever, hopefully close, because it's not just like, well, how do I grow 3% my business? It's like, how do I grow
Yeah.
3% as a parent, as a spouse? Like, that's what my wife and I, we talk about. There's a few couples we go out with, and I'm like, man, we're always better when we leave them. Like, that is a
Yeah.
couple we need to intentionally continue to cultivate relationships because they have 10 years on us as married couple. Like, they're
Yep.
great. So, like, those are the different areas, which goes back to what are the different games you're trying to actually win at?
Yeah. So freaking good. I love this. All right. I don't want to wrap this up, but we're going to start to because I got to watch the clock for you and for me. I know a lot of dream think doers are like, oh, this is what I needed today. This is something I'm working on. I know part of my heart's like, I've just thought of 3 people I want to talk to about this because I know they need it. I'm fine, but no, I'm kidding. I know I need it. And I
Asking
am
for a
thinking of
friend.
some people, exactly right. But I am thinking of some people that I've literally had conversations with in the last couple of weeks about this very thing. So I'm looking forward to talking with them about it. But as you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about comparison, and I love that visual, the metaphor of the fire, because you're right. Fire can be deadly and it can be what keeps us alive, right? Isn't that the wildness of comparison? What would you say when you think about it, when somebody's like, all right, I think I'm going to do better. I see new tools in my toolbox. I'm going to start using them. But what's one more tool to throw in that toolbox as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, it's a who, not a what, and that's finding an accountability partner. It's
Oh
it's
boy.
no different than we talk about somebody with an addiction having a sponsor. It's having
Yeah.
that friend when you feel yourself get trapped, when you spend some time on social media and you come off deflated, that you can just text and say, "Hey, I'm struggling right now with comparison. I feel blank." That they are in your corner to say, one, they can encourage you, but two, like, is that the game you even care about? Would you
Yep.
trade your family life for theirs? Like, that's the thing. And so having someone close to you that's in the trenches of life with you, they don't have to be a coach as well. They can be a manager, they can be whatever. But
Yep.
someone that you trust, that you can say, "Hey, would you just be my accountability partner as I'm continuing to work through this season of overcoming unhealthy comparison?" And that's something that's really beneficial in great relationships. And so you can have all the tools. I think a lot of us have a lot of the knowledge. It's the application, right? It's the
Yeah, it
going
is.
from knowing to doing. And
Right.
one of the ways I've found the transition becomes easier is with someone in your corner who's going to help you with it.
Come on. It's so wildly important, especially with this subject, any area of personal development, but I think especially with this subject. And I know that just about anybody you reach out to ask for help is probably needing help in the same thing. That's people ask me all the time, like, how do I grow my network? How do I build a mastermind group? All those things. How do I grow a tribe of encouraging people? It's like, well, who are you doing that for? Who are you doing that with? Be that for someone else. And it's amazing how many of those folks start showing up in your life. So I love that. So good. Jake, you're just bringing the gold again. What's the best way? I know people are going to want to find you. We'll put all of it in the show notes, of course, but where's the best place for people to start to find out more about what you're up to and what you're doing in the world?
Yeah, easiest place is going to be CompeteEveryday.com. You'll see links on there for the Beat Yesterday book and that landing page as it's coming soon with some tools and resources around a lot of the stuff we talked about today. But CompeteEveryday.com. And then if you're on Instagram or LinkedIn, Jake Thompson Speaks is my username, and would love to hear from you and just answer any other questions that maybe percolated while we were chatting today.
Right. And we didn't even bring it up because it's one of those things like it's still coming. But your next book is on this topic. So if you loved this conversation, definitely follow Jake because this book is going to change the game. And I can't wait for everybody to get a hold of it as well. We'll put the link in the show notes for that as well. And when it's available, we're going to shout it from the rooftops. I'll be one of the first readers. So I'm looking forward to this. Jake, brother, thanks for bringing the gold again. I appreciate you. And yeah, so grateful for you.
Thanks for having me on, my man.